Good morning. Thank you for joining me for another 5 good minutes with the Word. I'm Barry Bryson, and we're still in the book of Galatians as we study the life and letters of the Apostle Peter. We are in a letter by the Apostle Paul. I said to you yesterday, Paul never calls Peter Peter, but he does. He does in this one passage today. Then he goes right back to calling him Cephas again, which is what he generally calls him, and I don't know why. But he does call him Peter twice today, and I misspoke yesterday when I said that. But anyway, today we have this incident that makes us so disappointed, and we share in Paul's disappointment, not just with Peter, but with Barnabas as well. Let's not forget, Peter is the one who stood up on the day of Pentecost and said, "The promises to you and your children and all who are far off." And although it took him some time to understand the implications of his own words, he did come to know and to defend the right of the Gentiles to have access to the gospel and to be full members in God's family. He was the one who preached the gospel to Cornelius. He was the one who baptized Cornelius and his household. He was the one who went back to Jerusalem and gave an account and defended it. And yet, he's the one who causes the problem, or who makes it nearly unmanageable in Galatians 2. We mentioned yesterday that Peter was not very well known among Palestinian, Judean Christians, that he'd stayed 2 weeks, 15 days really, with Peter, Cephas, he calls him, and had become acquainted with James, but no one else really he knew him other than Barnabas, who had included him in the work at Antioch. So this work, we've talked about it before. We spent a whole session talking about this multicultural work, which was just exploding. Every bit as successful, it seems, as the Jerusalem work was. It says that Peter, Cephas, comes to visit them at Antioch. Before this, he does mention Peter, and mentions him by the name Peter, chapter 2, verses 7 and 8, in which he himself sees God as making Peter the point man of converting the Jews and making him the point man for converting the Gentiles. I mean, that's his vision of things. Then he says in verse 11, "When Cephas came to Antioch, I opposed him to his face, because he stood condemned." Those are hard words to be said about an apostle, by one apostle about another apostle, in a letter to a third-party congregation. But it's necessary. "For prior to the coming of certain men from James," James the Lord's brother, James who wrote the book of James, James who is, if not the leader, at least the poster child of the party of the circumcision. "Prior to the coming of certain men from James, he used to eat with the Gentiles, but when they came, he began to withdraw and hold himself aloof, fearing the party of the circumcision. But the rest of the Jews joined him in his hypocrisy, with the result..." Verse 13 is always hard because I just feel his betrayal. "With the result that even Barnabas was carried away by their hypocrisy. And when I saw that they were not straightforward about the truth of the gospel, I said to Cephas in the presence of everybody, 'If you, being a Jew, live like a Gentile and not like the Jews, how is it that you compel Gentiles to live like the Jews?'" You know, I love Peter. I don't just mean I love him because he's a guy in the Bible. I mean that I feel a real affection for him, like he's somebody I know, because the people who live in the Word are alive. They are alive. The Word is alive, Hebrews 4:12. God is the God of the living, not the God of the dead. Jesus said that himself. And I love Peter. And I love Paul too, but it's not the same, you know? Paul is so intimidating to me. Paul is that teacher that demands the best out of you and gets it, but that you never pal around with, to me. I mean, to me. Peter is the teacher that you learn alongside of, and you can see him learning too as he helps you to learn. And And Paul's right, and Paul has to say what he says, and I'm so thankful and blessed by the fact that he did and that we have it in the Word. But the fact that even Barnabas is pulled away. Barnabas. It's like saying, I don't know, your mom. Even mom did this, You think of someone you respect, and I think of my grandpa who never had a bad feeling towards anybody that I ever knew. Snubbing somebody, showing prejudice to someone, which I never saw him do. It just hurts to hear him say that even Barnabas. This is about table fellowship. And remember when we were talking about the conversion of Cornelius, they were hacked at Jerusalem, that you sat down and ate with these people. And this is what Paul is putting his fist on the table for. It's not that these people can't be baptized, but that somehow they're good enough for God's family, but not good enough for yours. And you can't act that way, and we can't either. He can't say, and even Barnabas, and even Barry, and even you, we're caught up in this whole group think, this whole group dynamic that my group is more important than God's family. I mean, our country is organized that way right now. We have to put our foot down like Paul and say, this is not the way it's going to be. Sorry to get a little political on this first session of 2021, but that's what Paul did, and it involved Peter. And Peter teaches us that even when we get it in our heads, we don't always learn everything we need to learn, and we don't always do everything we need to do. But Peter is going to stand up and speak truth in Acts chapter 15. We'll get there in a couple of days. Thank you for joining me for what is now 7 good minutes with the Word. Thank you.